Wow, I just stepped up and everyone just stopped talking. That feels powerful. Welcome to the Lawrence County Museum. We're so glad that you're here with us today. My name is Connie Post, and I'm the administrator here at the museum. And we are so pleased and honored to be opening this exhibit today called The Road to Education for Black Americans. I want to tell you just a little bit of how we got here before we introduce our speaker. And then after Dr. Glover speaks, we will go down to the exhibit, cut the ribbon. Teresa will give instructions on that. And we're excited to show you what we have. First, I want to say thank you to Mr. Christopher Pennington, who's going to raise his hand, even though he doesn't want to, in the back row. Thank you. He is our facilities manager and our designer here at the museum, and he has built downstairs a one-room schoolhouse out of reclaimed wood that is absolutely magnificent, and we're so excited to share that with you. He has worked tirelessly to provide as an authentic replica as we possibly could, and there simply would be no exhibit without his ability or creativity, so we're thankful to Chris. When we first set out to pursue the subject of Black history in the area of education, we knew that we were going to need some help from the community, a lot of support. And so I want to thank the committee that has helped us with our research and put things together for this. Teresa Noble and Debbie Vaughn, who are museum board members, have done a lot of research and called people and tracked down information and found pictures and all of those kind of things. But also very instrumental to this exhibit was the community support that we received from Susan Calhoun Ware, Harold Ligon, Cassandra Campbell, Robert Whitmore, and Elma Morrison. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and helping us get to the place where we are today, where we are opening this exhibit. We realize, of course, that the story of education for Black citizens in Lawrence County is a much bigger story than what we're able to put in our exhibit today. We have only scratched the surface. And so we would appreciate your help because we see this as a living, growing thing and would love for you to share your stories with us, share stories of your experiences in school, share stories of educators, and help us tell more because as you share your stories with us, we're going to share it with all of Lawrence County. And so we would love for you to add to this exhibit with your experiences. Now, I did not grow up in South Carolina, but all of my children have, and I have 5 children who are ages 15 to 24 with all sorts of varying needs and learning styles, and they have attended in Lawrence County charter schools, private schools, online public schools, and brick-and-mortar public schools in both Lawrence District 55 and 56. Some have been recipients of special education and accommodations, and we moved from Georgia to South Carolina, specifically looking for a special education option for one of our kids. South Carolina did not disappoint us. The South Carolina education system has provided a haven for our children, a place where their needs could be met and they could thrive. And today, my son, who was diagnosed with a learning disability in the 1st grade, has a college degree. My profoundly autistic daughter had superb care in a specialized learning environment from elementary all the way to adulthood. One of my children is a senior at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, and she's there on an academic scholarship. And I have a daughter who is hopefully headed to the South Carolina Governor's School of the Arts this fall, a public school, residential high school for the arts. The public school system of South Carolina, and specifically Lawrence County, has meant the world to my family. And as I prepared for this exhibit, I learned how public education came about in South Carolina, and I want to briefly share that with you before I turn it over to the speaker. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, former male slaves and free men of color now had the right to vote and to run for public office. In 1868, South Carolina had the distinction of becoming the first state legislature with a black majority, which led to the adoption of a new state constitution that same year. And this constitution featured many new amendments, including provisions for free public education for all children in the state, regardless of race or class. And I lost my place. I don't usually do that. So free public education. Prior to the Civil War, Southern states did not provide public education. Only white elites would send their children to private institutions while passing strict laws that denied education to the enslaved. And poor whites and free people of color and other marginalized populations did not receive a formal education. But black South Carolinians saw their newly acquired freedom and citizenship as an avenue to obtain formal schooling and literacy for everyone. It is not lost on me that my children have experienced a public education in South Carolina that was provided to them legally by legislators whose majority were former slaves. South Carolina owes a great debt to these black men who believed everyone should have an education, and I am a grateful mother, and I am honored to share just a small part of that story in our exhibit today. And now I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Lillie Beasley Glover, who is a native of Lawrence County, and she is the oldest daughter of the late Willie E. and Evelyn H. Beasley. She attended the public school of Lawrence County and graduated as class valedictorian from Thomas Sanders High School in May of 1957. Dr. Glover, Professor Emeritus, Department of Family and Consumer Sciences, South Carolina State University, provided outstanding leadership in the profession for more than 40 years. She earned a BS degree from South Carolina State College, a master's degree from New York University, and the Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, from the Ohio State University. Her distinguished career as an administrator, educator, researcher, state consultant, mentor, and provider of community service in public and private institutions in South Carolina, Ohio, and New York continues to positively impact lives. Dr. Glover exemplified the true meaning of the concepts, respected professional and successful leader, as she fulfilled the responsibilities of many roles. Dr. Glover's work generated funds that strengthened the educational capacity of many aspects of family and consumer sciences programs, and her research agenda focused on quality of life for rural communities. She received numerous honors and awards, including South Carolina State Distinguished Endowed Faculty Chair, Outstanding Alumna Award, Professor of the Year and Teacher of the Year awards several times, and the Leader Distinguished Service and Legend Awards from the American Association of Family and Consumer Sciences. These accomplishments give testament to a lifestyle dedicated to helping others. Today we're in the presence of greatness. Dr. Glover, we want to turn this over to you.
Too much information. Next time I'll submit less. But thank you.
Enjoy talking about you. Let me slide this up closer.
Thank you and good morning still to each of you. It is with some reservations that I agreed when Mrs. Morrison contacted me to do this. And I said to her, well, you know, I can deal with some of it from my beginning with education until I graduated, but you need to find someone else to deal with it from that point forward, because I really have not been back in Lawrence on a continuous basis since then, so I don't know many of the things, and I understand some great things that have happened with education in Lawrence, South Carolina, especially after forced integration. But we'll move forward. And thank you for that background information about the legislature. And I do know that many blacks were involved in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, as legislators. As a matter of fact, the former president early on, first president, I think, of South Carolina State, and several others were involved as legislators. So I'm glad that they were involved, because it did open the doors for some things that followed. It's just that during the time when I was growing up, I knew nothing about any of that, and some of you either. And some of you could be up here sharing the information that I'm going to share with you, adding to it, because no man is an island, and I'm sure your experiences will parrot some of the things that I have experienced as a growing up youth in Lawrence, South Carolina. The overall education of African Americans includes both formal and informal attempts by blacks to become literate and develop skills that would help them to survive in a racialized society. The best way to tell where you're going is to know where you've been. And that is why it's so important that we keep telling the story and keep reminding young people of this. It's appalling that we find so many young people nowadays who don't know anything about the history of their race, the history of their beginnings, the history of this country, the history of South Carolina, the history of education in other areas. But we can do something about that. About 1/3 way through my notations, an overwhelming thought occurred to me. My memory is not as good as it used to be. I also began to think about the major aspects of educational development, educational opportunities. And then I thought, how can we forget about emotional, mental, physical, social, and environmental factors and their impact on education? Basically, we are talking about the nature of society, what was going on in our society, the nature of the individual and the family, and the nature of knowledge. And we think about knowledge today in AI, it's amazing that we can even think clearly because of all the changes that have occurred. And many of us today are challenged about what's going on. And it's a miracle that I'm standing here today, because I did come through that stage when most blacks were not recognized as full-fledged citizens. Thank God for changes. I was born and spent my formative years in Lawrence County in a multi-family sharecropping on a farm, and my paternal grandfather was in charge. By definition, we were poor, very poor. But this God-fearing Christian family network and church attendance were sources of inspiration throughout my early years. The family network was very strict in terms of religious beliefs and practices, which resulted in limited participation in worldly activities for most of us, especially the females in our society, in our family. You might say we lived a sheltered life. Our mode of transportation was 2 mules, or several mules, farming, horses, wagons, walking, and 1 shared automobile. Somehow we flourished despite these unwritten codes in our society and imposed mandates. I cannot begin to list the do's and don'ts that we were told to observe as we moved through our society. It seemed to have been, if you're white, you right, if you're black, stand back. And some of us have heard that expression. It's obvious that our parents, church leaders, community adults, and teachers provided our first lessons in respect, courtesy, dignity, caring, honesty, integrity, and love. Race and class were very much governed by the Jim Crow laws of our society. Separate but equal. Separate but unequal was what we are dealing with. It usually meant suffering and injustice for the black communities. I was aware of the meaning of segregation and the presence of KKKs during my early years. My education began in a rural, 1-room, wooden classroom, frame building, which was the result of the United States Supreme Court ruling that upheld racial segregation and codified the doctrine of separate but equal. Blacks were regarded by many as second-class citizens, separated from whites by the law, by private actions in transportation, public accommodations, recreational facilities, medical facilities, prisons, armed forces, and schools both in the northern and the southern states. So fleeing north didn't solve the problem. In the one-room school, Oak Grove School, grades primary through 1 were taught by a licentiate educator who happened to have been my aunt. Memories include 3 of my siblings and me walking a mile plus to school on a dirt road. On several occasions, some shoes lost the battle with the dirt road and the mud. On several occasions also, there were some buses passing by with white children on it, and unkind remarks were made. Occasionally, children from the neighborhood would join us on our walk to school. The school building was poorly constructed, had uneven shaped desks, and an outhouse with a broken wooden floor and a seat. Accidents waiting to happen. Occasionally, a white nurse showed up at the school to vaccinate us. My fear of needles continues to this day because of those vaccinations. I tremble when I see one coming. During this time, however, most of the black children were educated in one-room schoolhouses. Their education began at least at that stage. I do have a vivid memory of walking to school or experiencing a snow day at school when I was in the 3rd grade, still in a rural area. We were in school and it began to snow. Our families had this one car, and my grandmother said to my mother, who was in and out of the house because we were living adjacent to each other, "You drive down to the schoolhouse and pick up the children and Mamie, and then let her drive back," because I think she had driven maybe 1 or 2 times more than my mother. 4 aunts and uncles and 3 siblings piled into the car with the adults. Less than a quarter of a mile up the dirt road, the car skidded and flipped over on the right side. Luckily, neighbors in the area came to rescue us. They got us out with minor injuries, and they flipped the car upright, but Mom drove the rest of the way home. Thankfully, my injury was just a glass cut on my right hand. I think the scar is gone. Sharecropping and rural living meant that during certain times of the year, we had to miss school days because we had to take care of the farming duties. Neither of my parents were educated beyond the 8th grade level. However, after a stint in the Army, my father managed to secure funds and engage the labor and experience of his father and brother and build a house for us for the wife and 6 children in the city of Lawrence, and that was in 1948. That house is still standing and still very comfortable, believe it or not. After we moved to a designated section of the city of Lawrence, our lifestyle changed. A couple of years after the birth of the last child, Mother became a domestic worker and Father did construction work, painting, contracting, and barbering. Those of us who were older continued to assist Grandpa with farming until I graduated from high school. That's right, I picked cotton until I finished high school. Most blacks did not allow living their childhood as a sharecropper child to define them. On the contrary, those conditions seem to provide many youth with a strong will and foundation upon which to achieve and flourish. I know I vowed never again after I finished 12th grade that I would have the experiences that I encountered during my youth. Those experiences included trying to earn extra money to purchase things for school and extracurricular activities. You know, I was good enough to care for the white children, cook their foods, and clean their houses, but had to abide by Jim Crow laws in stores, theaters, medical facilities, and even walking the streets in town sometime. You had to step aside so they could get by. From 10th grade forward, I had a part-time job and spent the summers after high school as a sleep-in maid on Long Island. So I did have experiences in the North and the South. City life meant that two female siblings, ages 8 and 9, had to walk approximately 1 mile across town, right through this town, to Hampton Street School. There were 4 teachers in that school. They taught grades 1 through 4, and we even had a principal. Still separate, but not equal. Many black individuals and families continue to emphasize the value of hard work, fidelity, patience, perseverance, delayed gratification, and resistance to racial dehumanization. By no means are we as blacks responsible for the racist oppressions visited upon us, but we are responsible for our response to such oppression. And some of us had to learn that the hard way. Attending school in grades 5 through 12 was an awakening. Classes for the 5th grade were held in a portable metal building adjacent to the brick double-winged high school building, which is Thomas Sanders High School. It's a middle school now. The school was just 2 blocks from the back door of our home. I could hear the intake bell ring. Well, you know, I was always late, or often late. One time, my teacher in the 12th grade decided she was going to cure me of this, and she had me to stand in front of the class and sing a Dilla, a Dollar, a 10 o'clock scholar. And I can't sing. You can imagine what happened. However, many of the teachers, like the adults in our community, serve as extended family members. The teachers were really vested in every aspect of our educational development, our citizenship, and our social development. Individually and collectively, they provided outreach services and sometimes financial support. And some of us experienced that. Social promotion was not very popular during that time and not really an option, but we were still separate but not equal. High school years were different. School consolidation occurred, and more students meant more friends, more competition, more subjects to study, and more social activities. I expanded my vision to sports, leadership organizations, choral practices of music, and community projects. Schools and church activities provided me with opportunities to travel and represent the school at the local and state level. Throughout the years, as our parents and other family members struggled to provide the essentials for daily living and extras, they were humiliated, disrespected, dishonored, degraded, and sometimes treated inhumanely. The practice of being issued used books from the white schools prevailed throughout the 1960s until integration was forced. I was also informed that the practice later included some band instruments and other extracurricular activities or resources. The values and behavior of black folks created the foundation for the black liberation movement of the late 1950s and early 1960s. Southern states ignored the Brown versus Board of Education Topeka ruling that stated, in the field of public education, and the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Things didn't change. Not all blacks wanted integration, believe it or not, but they did want equality. Black community schools were placed in nurturing and comfort, were places of nurture and comfort despite not having the newest books or the nice furniture. Teachers and principals were often community leaders, and parents were actively involved in their children's education. If only that were true of more parents today. Many blacks refused to internalize the value of white supremacy and black inferiority, and they conducted themselves insofar as possible as equal, if not sometimes superior to whites. What I know for sure, many black educators and business owners were regarded or viewed as the door to the future for most school students. Several accounts of black entrepreneurship, blacks and whites working together, was the result of the good old boy system. As societal changes became more evident, black and whites were involved in secret meetings, secret gatherings to determine ways to address the needs of our society and the issues. Eventually, the law of the land mandated change. In some states in 1965, school busing began, and in order to remedy the problem of racial imbalance, it became the norm. Later, attendance zones were established, and a school choice was instituted. All of this to avoid commingling or integration. School integration was eroded due to white flight, the establishment of private church schools, busing, and residential segregation. Early education of black adults focused on the results of a report from county training schools. These schools provided courses on teacher training in basic subjects and basic industry skills. Practical lessons were combined with traditional subjects to provide a more applied approach to issues encountered in everyday environments of blacks. They weren't concerned about the whites. An NAACP lawsuit addressed the issue of blacks not being allowed to attend white institutions of higher education. However, in South Carolina, the decision was made to pay for blacks to attend out-of-state schools, higher education institutions. They called it a tuition scholarship. And they would be reimbursed for the tuition and for travel to study in northern institutions. This did not eliminate discrimination. After graduating from high school in 1957, I followed the path of several of my aunts and enrolled in an HBC institution. Graduating with honors in 1961, it made it easy for me to secure employment. I taught vocational education for 3 years in a high school in South Carolina. Segregation was still the norm, still an unwritten law in the land. College students protested and sit-ins were occurring throughout the southern and some areas, northern states. South Carolina was still paying out-of-state tuition for graduate students, black students to study in northern universities. A portion of my master's degree from New York University was paid for by South Carolina. No guilt feelings here. Because some of these funds were funds that I was paying in taxes because I was teaching. My departure from the South and the multitude of overt racial practices was with few regrets. I continued to provide different types of support for the cause because its needs were great and many of my relatives were caught up in this, what we call societal norm. African Americans and some whites across the country understood the profound impact of segregation and inferior educational practice on black students. I repeat, African Americans and some whites across the country understood the profound impact of segregation and inferior educational practice on black students. Factors such as deindustrialization, globalization, intractable racism in jobs, housing, and education are among the causes of today's social disorder. Black Americans have inherited a perpetual resource disadvantage in a society that refuses to enact policies to correct the condition. Today's society shows both our progress and an ongoing challenge of overcoming the past and present racial and socioeconomic issues. The policy of the United States of America should be to bring the African American to full and equal sharing in the responsibilities and the rewards. My appreciation for the environment that nurtured and sustained me throughout my childhood, youth, and young adulthood is far greater today than when I began this reflection. The richness of my black African American heritage unfolds by leaps and bounds. I hope that this has provided some enlightenment for you and given you something to think about as you reflect on your childhood. And I'm sure that some of you could have said, well, that could have been my life. That is part of who I am. That is part of what happens to me. And I'm hoping that you are willing to share that with others so that it will make a difference the next time we get to this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glover, for sharing with us. It is a travesty that public education was given to South Carolina in 1868 and then was removed for black people after Reconstruction in 1877, and it took 100 years before integration took place in the state. 1970 is the year that I was born. I'm not that old. It wasn't that long ago. And we thank you for sharing with us. We tell these things because they happened, and in the telling, we pray that they never happen again. And we're going to turn this over to Teresa, who's president of the board of the museum, and she's going to give us instructions for how we're going to, in a very fun way, according to Elma Morrison, we're going to open this exhibit and share with you some more heritage of her childhood.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Before I give you instructions, and you know, I do love to tell people what to do. I'm a teacher by trade. And so before I do that, I want to tell you about a few things that are coming up in the next, this month and next month. There are lots of things that will happen at this museum throughout the year. And we always try to keep things fresh. Just because you went to the exhibit hall today, you might come back next week and there will be something different or added. So please keep up with us on our website and on our Facebook page. And don't we have Twitter too or something? We have Instagram, excuse me. All right. So I'm not really up on the stuff. Before I forget, too, I always shamelessly promote our membership. If you're not a member of the museum, I hope that you will consider becoming one. If you need to renew, please do so. I don't know if you know this, but our museum exhibit hall is open to everyone free of charge. And one of the ways that we do that is through our membership. You may also know that we took a huge funding cut from the county this year. It was tight, but we're making it, and we will continue to do so. But with your help, it would be lovely to become a member. And if you don't want to be a member and you want to be on our email newsletter, please make sure that you put either your physical address or preferably your email address on the visitor log. If you haven't signed the visitor log, please do that. I hope you all don't mind doing that, but it's very important to us as we write grants to find out who comes to the museum, how many people, and where they're from. So it's really, that's why we bug you to sign our visitor log. So upcoming on Tuesday, February the 18th, we will have Dr. Kendra Hamilton here. She is the author of Romancing the Gullah. And she's going to be here at, let's see what time, at 7 o'clock. And if you want more information about that, please check our websites. We also have some posters down there. Or call us, and we'll tell you more information. On February the 23rd at 3 o'clock, our special guest, Harold Ligon and Laurel Hill Baptist Church and Smyrna AME Church are going to present a musical visit to days of old. And there will be presentations of Negro spirituals, common meter music, slavery hymns, and more. So please come out on Sunday, February the 23rd. And the last thing I'm going to tell you about is the Piney Grove School. It is located now at Culbertson's Back Country Settlement in Gray Court. It was a Rosenwald school. And if you don't know about Rosenwald schools, I bet you'll find out a little bit more. But the president and the owner of Sears and Roebuck created a foundation where Rosenwald schools were built. And I think that he made a big impact on many people across the South. So on March the 15th, at 1 o'clock, there will be an opportunity to tour it. We'll have some people there from the Gray Court. What is their society? The Gray Court Historical Society. Anyway, they'll be there. You can always go by there and look at the outside, but it will be open that day on the 15th. So, now, on to more fun stuff. One of my greatest pleasures working on this committee has been listening to the tales and the stories that we shared around our committee table. And one of those tales and stories came from Elma Morrison, and she told us about how their school day started. And she said that they would bring their paper bags of lunch, and they would line up outside the school with their teacher. And they would sing songs, sing hymns, read from the Bible, and then they would all march into the school, to their classroom. And so we had the fabulous idea, I can't credit it to myself, but our committee decided we need to sort of reenact that. So we're going to do that, and Mr. Ligon is going to play the piano for us, I believe. And so what we want you to do is to go by and pick up a bag lunch, which is kind of skimpy, but it's what Elma told us we needed. It's a biscuit and jelly and some water. And pick up your bag lunch and your water bottle and take the elevator or the stairs down into the lobby, and we're going to reenact our school day as we go to our classroom. And, you know, we are a multi-age classroom. So